Hi everyone, my name is Louis Apia, aka Nazir. Well, that's because I'm the creator of Tales of Nazir. I represent Louis Cage Studios, that's my company. I founded Louis Cage Studios as early as 2008. We're into motion graphics, graphic design, and animation. I'm so glad to be sitting here today to talk to beautiful people like you about animation because of the wonderful way we have evolved in animation in Ghana. If you look back in the early 90s, I'm sure for those of you watching, especially the non-Ghanaians, will not be able to relate with what I'm saying, but with the Ghanaians especially, they will know. If you watch as far back as the early 90s, we have really evolved in animation. If you look on the telly now, you're seeing a whole lot of animated commercials and what have you. Today I'd like to share my raw talents, with my fans watching me now. I wouldn't want to bore you too much in going too deep, in detailed animation, but I'm going to talk about the basic animation. What's basic animation? Basically creating simple characters and being able to move them from one side to the other and hopefully making them talk. If we have enough time, we might get to the point where the characters are actually talking. But today, the most paramount lesson I want to share with my fans or viewers is how to get the character, create the character, and get the character to move from one side to the other. So, like I said, I'm glad to have you all watching me now. And like I said, my name is Louis Apia. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to start with creating a character. Okay, or object, in this case. I have my Camtasia screen recording already, so let me just press the record button so it records the screen. Okay, all right, yeah, we're good to go. Okay, so warning or caution, I'm not actually going to teach you like a typical lecturer in a boring lecture hall talking about animation. I'm actually going to teach you like I'm talking to a layman, because that's how I learned animation, from my room. Okay, so we have a animation app open here. It's called Toon Boom Studio. That's what I use for animation. And Toon Boom Studio, it's an amazing software used for traditional animation, especially. There are so many other animation softwares, Moho and what have you, but I prefer Toon Boom Studio because I love traditional animation. So as you can see here on my screen, this is our interface. We have our pencil. For those of you who are also a bit familiar with Microsoft Paint, it's similar. We have our pencil, we have our paint bucket, we have our eraser, we have the magnify tool, and we have the color picker and what have you. So today we would be using the brush tool or the pencil tool to create my ball. So let me just make a quick illustration or stroke. Okay, so now what Toon Boom does is, after you've made your stroke, it sort of gives it enhances your stroke. It makes it more finer, than the actual stroke you made on the screen. And you can adjust the fineness of your stroke with this tab over here, smoothness. So I can increase the smoothness of my stroke. So if you watch this, for instance, if you watch this, I can make this, let's say, Z stroke. You see, it makes it more finer. So that's not what we're going to deal with. Let me just undo. Now these two buttons over here are the undo and redo button. Yes, and like I said, I'm not your typical animation lecturer. Yes, so I hope you follow through with what I'm saying. We're going to create our ball. I can use my free hand to draw a simple circle, but Toon Boom makes it easy. We have different shapes. So I'm going to take the ellipse tool and create our ball. And there we have it, our very beautiful ball. I'm sure this was the very ball Suarez hit from the pole when Ghana was about to score. Yes, so we have our ball here, and but it's empty. It's just the outline. So we need to fill it with a color. And as you can see, well, I don't know if my screen recording, I think my screen recording is just recording the area where I am making these sketches. It's not picking the color palette, but I'm sure the camera will pick the color palette from here. So we have our color palette over here. I can choose any color at all. Let's say blue, which is my favorite color, and pick my color, my bucket tool. I'm gonna click it, and I fill my ball. So we have a blue ball, and we have our layers over here. So I'm actually going to rename this layer to ball. Okay, let me drag this keyboard here a bit so that, all right, so ball. Okay, so we have our ball. Now animation is made up of keyframes, and basically it's an illusion. It's a series of still images put together to create a motion effect. So let me put my thing on charge a bit so it doesn't go off in the middle of whatever I'm trying to illustrate here. So these are keyframes over here. From my left to my right, I can see a little bit over 70 keyframes. If you can see the figure over here, I'm sure my cursor is hovering around the figure over here, 70. So I can, like I said, it's a series of still images put together to create the illusion of motion, thus animation. But in this case, we're not going to create different images of the ball. We're actually going to make the ball bounce, the same particular ball bounce. And it's one keyframe, so if you press play, it won't have enough keyframes of the ball to play over to create the motion. Hence, we need to expand the keyframes. So what I'm going to do is that we have a first keyframe over here which contains the ball image. So I'm going to just press and hold, and copy the drawing object, and then move my cursor all the way to, let's say, keyframe 70. Click keyframe 70, press and hold, and paste. So now we have stretched the keyframe, and whatever happens in between these keyframes can cause that motion effect or the animation you want to see. So I'm going to add a keyframe. Now, mind you, I've just stretched the keyframes. All the way from 0 to 70. But it's still, if you press play, you won't see any movement because we haven't added a motion keyframe, or we haven't added a motion point to the long keyframe that we've just created. So this is the tool to create the motion keyframe. It's called a transform tool. So I'm going to click it, and we're going back to our first keyframe. So press and hold and add keyframe. Now what we've done is we've set a motion point for this ball in the beginning of the keyframe. So I'm going to keep this one. Let's just drag it here a bit. So let's assume our ball is going to bounce from the top, and touch the ground, and then move or bounce out of the scene. But before our ball bounces, we need to create a base or a ground. So let's just create a ground. Same way I created the ball with the ellipse tool, I can also create a ground. It's just a bare ground, so I can create it with a rectangle tool and just fill it with earth, brown, or something that signifies a ground. Yeah. So we're going to create. Oh, sorry for moving fast. I warned you, I'm not your typical lecturer in the lecture hall. Yes. So we're going to create the ground, and the ball on the ground and any other objects we add should be on a different timeline. Yes. So in order to create a new timeline, you see this plus, I'm hovering my cursor around this plus button over here, is to add a different timeline. And with timelines, there are different types of timelines. We have image timelines, we have sound timelines, we have drawing timelines. For this lesson, we're dealing with a drawing. We're dealing with a drawing animation. We're dealing with drawing timeline. So we're going to leave the option here at drawing timeline and press OK. Now, in order not to confuse yourself with the timelines, we can rename this timeline. So we're going to name it ground. Yes. ground. So we have our ground. Now let's draw our ground with the rectangle tool, and this is where you find all the shapes. So the drop down arrow key you see here is to give you the other options of the shapes that are attached to this button. So I'm going to choose the rectangle tool and create the ground. Now you see my color was already on blue, and that's how come our outline is blue, but I usually prefer black or darker outline, so I'm going to choose the color black. I don't know if the camera is picking this. I'm choosing the color black. I'm going to reduce my outline size, just to get some thin fine outlines. So I've created my ground, and I'm going to fill it with a paint bucket, like MS Paint, Microsoft Paint. Let's fill it with, let's say, a darker shade of brown. Okay, so brown. All right, now we need to stretch this keyframe to match up with the last keyframe of the ball. So like I did before, press and hold, you copy, you click, you press and hold, and you paste. So we have stretched keyframes of both the ball and the ground. So now we have the ground, but we're not dealing with the ground now, we're dealing with the ball. Now what happens is, I would want to move the ball, but if I choose the movement tool and then I select the ball, Toon Boom is not going to allow me to select the ball, because the layer of the ground, or the ground layer, is above the layer of the ball. So automatically it's trying to tell me, you're telling Toon Boom that you're dealing with the ground now, but we're not dealing with the ground, we're dealing with the ball. So we're going to drag the layer, the ball layer, right on top of the ground layer, as I've demonstrated here. So now let's make our ball bounce. So we're going to choose the movement tool, the transform tool. I like to call it the movement tool because, like I said, I'm demonstrating this to the layman. So let's make it bounce here, and let's say from 0 to 10 we can have it move. Now, as a typical ball, also including the laws of physics, you would want to stretch it out a bit, or compress it a bit, because it's a ball, so immediately it hits the ground, the impact would make it stretch a bit or compress a bit, just a little bit. So let's compress it a bit, let me undo here. Let it touch the ground first, then it compresses, so let's compress it a bit. So if I move my cursor over the keyframes, you can see that the ball has compressed. Immediately it touched the ground. So my ball from the top drops to the ground, compresses, and moves back up, let's say to keyframe 20. So we're going to drag this here, and it looks stretched even in the air, but it's supposed to return back to its natural form. So we're going to stretch it out a bit, just to create the accurate circle we had before. I think this is okay. So then again, moving back, we have a ball from the top touching ground, compressing, and moving back up. Now we're going to let it bounce or touch ground again, and you don't need to drag it again. You can just copy your touchdown keyframe and paste it to, let's say, 30. Now if you paste it to 30, you've copied the touchdown keyframe at this point and pasted it to 30. So it will give you Toon Boom. If you're trying to tell Toon Boom that Toon Boom at keyframe 30, give me exactly what I did at keyframe 10. But we don't want the ball here, we want it moving further. So we're going to push it or drag it further. So if I move my cursor, the ball is bouncing from the top, it touches the ground, compresses, moves back up, touches ground again, and it compresses. So let's compress it. And this is the point. You need to center. It depends on where you center this point. I want to compress it from the bottom of the ball, so I'm going to position this point or this node right here at the middle bottom, and then compress. Exactly. So as you can see, my ball from the top touches ground, compresses, moves back up, touches ground, compresses. Now let's say at keyframe 40, yes, we're going to move back up and move the point a little bit to the middle so we can stretch it evenly. Nice. And then we're going to repeat the same thing at keyframe 50. Bring it down, move the points to the middle bottom and compress. Or before, just let it touch ground, and then let's say keyframe 51, you compress. So as you can see, my ball is bouncing. It's not magic, it's actually bouncing. So keyframe 60, let's see, let's move. Okay, to the top. Okay. Alright. So let's play what we have on repeat and let's see how it goes. But wait, let's end the keyframe properly. So let this one bounce out of the scene. Let it bounce out of the scene. Great. Now let's play what we have on repeat. So my blue ball is bouncing. It actually sounds funny the way I say my blue ball is bouncing, you know. But yes, we have our ball bouncing now. So what we have now, we don't have a background for it. I mean, you can see a white background, but if you render it, it will come out as black because to Toon Boom, a transparent background is white. You see it as white, but Toon Boom sees it as transparent. There's no background. So we're going to create a background. So let's create a new layer behind. Now the background should be behind both the ball and the ground. You can't create the background on top of the ball, on top of the ground, you know, because you only see the background. You won't see the objects that are behind the background. So we're going to create the background under all these layers we have here. I'm going to call it, let's say, sky. Great. I'm going to drag it right beneath the ground layer and take my rectangle tool, choose sky-like color, yeah, and draw my background, you know. Take the bucket tool, the fill bucket tool, fill paint, and click. So, and don't worry, I mean, your objects are still there. We're dealing with the sky now, and I'm telling Toon Boom that we're dealing with the sky now. That's how come we're seeing just the sky. So we're going to have to copy and paste. Let me move this a little bit down. Yes, and paste at keyframe 70. Exactly. So now let's bounce our ball, and here we go. So usually when we reach this stage, this is when sound effects come into play, you know, because if you're watching, let's say, cartoons and then you see a ball bouncing, you know, it has this boing, boing, boing sound, You get it? So if you have, let's say, a sound effect, like that, you can create a new layer. And like I said, we have different types of layers. We have drawing layers, we have sound layers, we have image layers. So I clicked this little plus button here to give me the options of the layers I want. The drop down menu bar is here, and I click the sound button. You press OK, and if you have the sound effect, the boing boing sound effect, you just drag it here, and then you have it. So in this case, I just want to demonstrate to you how to create an object, a simple object, and then move it from one point to the other.